Well, after another midweek of European football, it's back to domestic matters this weekend, and it looks like the title battle is back on. Last week's defeat at Villa Park means it's just 2 wins in the last 5 league games for Arsenal, whose lead is down to 2 points. Mikel Arteta's men face bottom side Wolves on Saturday, and then on Sunday, Manchester City face a tricky trip to high-flying Crystal Palace, while third place Aston Villa will take on West Ham. We've got it all covered on this week's Assist. Well, a warm welcome along to the Assist in association with freesupertips.com, your home for daily football hackers and bet builders. I'm Warren Ashurst, and I'm joined this week by Dan Childs and Mark Langdon to discuss their thoughts and tips on both the Premier League and EFL fixtures upcoming. Don't forget, of course, you can interact with us and give us your thoughts on the Racing Post YouTube channel. We've been following Ian Johnson pretty carefully over the last few weeks as he's been in a last man standing competition with a well-known bookmaker. He made it to round 15 when he said there was only 1,000 players left, and he had to eventually pick between 6 teams last week. Unfortunately for Ian, Fulham let him down against Crystal Palace. Ray Stevenson also got in touch as well and said the guys that sub for Mark are good, but he's the best. Why has he been missing for so long? Well, Ray, it's almost like we listened to you and brought Mark back for this week's show. Mark, we've not heard from you from a bit on the domestic assist, so just a quick word on the title race before we get into this week's list of Premier League matches. It looks an enthralling clash now at the top, but it looked like it may well have been over a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I never go for the fact that these things are done and dusted in like September, October. Do you remember after about 3 games this season, everyone was saying Liverpool had already won the league, and then we've already crowned Arsenal as champions. I think people get way too excited too early. I would still say though, I mean, Arsenal, a bad result for them at Aston Villa last week, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't be kind of saying that it's that terrible, really. Arsenal will lose games, they will drop points. Away to Aston Villa is one of those games where it can happen. I tipped City at the start, so I'm happy enough with how they're sort of getting on. But I mean, I think Arsenal are the rightful favourites. They've got the deepest squad. I don't think their fans should be panicking after what happened against Aston Villa. Hard away game. They had a few injuries. You do just drop points. City have got a hard game this week against Crystal Palace. They might drop points.
Yeah, they have indeed, and we'll be looking ahead to that very shortly indeed as we look to the weekend's Premier League games, and arguably that is the match of the weekend in the Premier League at Selhurst Park on Sunday at 2 o'clock. Crystal Palace against Manchester City. As far as the prices are concerned, Palace around about 29-10. It is 17-20 City, and the draw is 29-10. Dan, we'll start with you with this one. City, with that big win against Real Madrid in midweek, will have certainly helped confidence because it's been a kind of a backwards and forwards type scenario with results in recent weeks.
Yeah, they're putting a bit of a run together now in the Premier League. With the inconsistency that's been around, they've had 3 straight Premier League wins as well. I know there was one of them was that chaotic 5-4. Away to Fulham, but a good 3-0 win as well last weekend at home to Sunderland, and they're just starting to put a bit of a run together, and I'm sure they'll be delighted at this stage of the season to only be 2 points behind Arsenal. This game is a tricky one. The games following it, leading up to Christmas, they've got quite a decent run of fixtures after this weekend. So I think if they could stay 2 points away from Arsenal after this weekend, that would be a massive plus for them. I think it's a tough game though. I mean, Palace are sort of hanging around up there despite the kind of limitations I've felt with the squad and the amount of games that they've been having to play. But for them to be fourth at this stage and had to deal with an injury to Ismail Assar in the last couple of weeks, who's a key attacking player for them, that's a fantastic effort from them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily Palace have been at their best in the last sort of month, Mark, but they're still able to ground out results.
Yeah, I mean, they're a well-organised team, solid defensively, got quality in midfield, and also, forwards in particularly Mateta that kind of will always occupy defenders and just give you a tough game. You kind of have to play well to beat them. I think you get some teams in the Premier League where one week they might be a 9 out of 10, and then other weeks they might be a 2 or a 3. Whereas with Crystal Palace, you feel like there's a real consistency to their performances, sort of 7, 8, or around that mark every single week. And so the game last week against Fulham could have gone either way, couldn't it? I mean, Fulham had a goal ruled out for a really tight offside, and then Palace, end up winning the match. But they seem to be on the right end of the margins. What I would say, though, is that the squad is really sort of short on numbers, and I think that we are seeing that already, and I think we'll only see that more over the Christmas period when they've also got a League Cup quarter-final to fit in as well against Arsenal, as well as a game that's being played tonight in the Conference League as we speak. So a lot of games at the moment for Glasner's side, and I think that will take its toll over the next month or so.
So massive game in terms of the top end of the table. Dan, we'll start with you in terms of best bets. What we're looking at here.
I'm going to go with a draw. I think it's a little bit overpriced. Palace are just such a hard team to beat generally. I mean, only three losses in the Premier League, 1 defeat at home. I do agree that with their squad size that there's probably a bit of a sticky patch, not far around the corner for them. But I think even though that their game against Shelbourne is they've got less recovery time, I just feel that the magnitude of City's game at Real Madrid, even though they went there and won, it's going to take a lot emotionally and physically out of the Manchester City players. So to then back Manchester City at odds on to win a tough away fixture after going to Real Madrid on the Wednesday, I'm just not entirely comfortable with that. I think City it's a game City could well win, but at the prices, it'll be a tight game. Palace tough to beat. I'll back Palace to get a draw.
Would you be concerned by some of City's away performances in the league recently, Mark?
Not overly. I think they've played, even in the defeats against Villa and Newcastle, I didn't think they actually played that badly in those games. And then they've gone to Real Madrid and won, and Real were having a sticky spot themselves, but that's still a fantastic achievement to go there, get the points. I thought the left-hand side, O'Reilly and Doku, was devastating against Real Madrid. And Guardiola's not changing the team that much, is he? So that he's looking for that continuity. I'm going to go for City to win. I'm going to go for Man City and over 2.5 goals, because City have conceded in 6 of their last 7 away games, which is maybe what you're alluding to there, Warren, with some of their sort of less than perfect defensive performances. But they've got a lot of goals in them with Foden and Haaland and, like I say, Doku really impressing on that left wing in terms of creation. So, City to win and keep that pressure right on Arsenal.
Okay, well, we're going to stick with the Sunday 2 o'clock kickoffs. It's West Ham, Aston Villa next at the London Stadium. The Hammers 11-4. It's evens for Villa and a 5-2 the draw. West Ham showing some signs of certainly a fight more than anything else. Mark, they're not going to just go with a whimper at the bottom end of the table. They've certainly shown more under Nuno that they can yet still battle a way out of it. But this is going to be a huge test of their progress against the Villa side, full of confidence at the moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, some Villa fans talking about a title charge after they beat Arsenal last week. I think that was probably their best performance of the season, Villa, because on expected goal difference, they're actually in the bottom half of the table. So they're outperforming some of the underlying statistics, but it's hard to model confidence, isn't it? And this is a team that's absolutely flying at the moment and just full of belief. But I would say that West Ham, having, was it about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, when they played Brentford on that Monday night, they looked absolutely hopeless and hapless and just devoid of any kind of quality in the side and any fight. But we've seen a different West Ham in recent weeks. They've only lost one game in the last 6, and I think they can play their part in this one. I've gone for both teams to score, because while Villa are absolutely flying, they have conceded in 7 of their last 8 away matches. But you do fancy them for a goal. But West Ham, with the front three that they've got, a lot of fluidity, a lot of quality. I thought they played quite well in the second half at Brighton last week. So both teams to score.
Okay, 5 wins on the spin for Villa, Dan. Can they make it 6?
I'm not so sure. Those 5 wins all been by a single goal, haven't they? And you wonder how sustainable that is. They're getting the right side of some fine margins at the moment. The confidence will be sky high. There's no doubt about that. They've got to play Basel as well on the Thursday in Europe. I know the squad's kind of working quite well there. He's often making 5 or 6 changes and still getting good performances in Europe and domestically. But I just think that the prices, in and around evens for what is now, I think, a tough away fixture. I think West Ham they are showing quite a bit of improvement for a period now. The 2-2 draw at Bournemouth, the Man United performance I thought was really good as well. Competed really well in that game. Came from a goal behind against a team that's been, in better form, Man United recently. And the Brighton performance, where, give or take that decision for at the end could have gone either way. Really, the VAR decision for Brighton's goal could have had a great win there away to Brighton. So they're showing a lot of improvement. At home, there's always an issue with, with the atmosphere, whether it will be with them or against them. But I think with the recent performances, I think the crowd will be up for it. And for Villa, it's a tricky-ish game. I think again, another tight one. I'm going to go with a draw again.
Okay, well, we're going to head to the league leaders now, because Arsenal have what most people would think was a pretty straightforward home game on Saturday evening, an 8 o'clock kickoff when they play host to bottom side Wolves. Arsenal are 8-1 on to claim the victory. It's as big as 20-1 for Wolves to claim their first win of the season, and 15-2 the draw. Arsenal, Dan, we'll start with you. Obviously, another impressive performance in the Champions League in midweek, and they made a couple of changes and brought other players in, and it seems to sort of give them a little bit of extra impetus sometimes when they do make those changes. I mean, Noni Madueke scored an unbelievable goal.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll kick on as well and get a comfortable victory here. I'm just looking at this game. There's often a game on the card that I just think, where do I find a tip from here? And you're looking at you can't see anything other than a comfortable home win. I'm going to do my best here to make a case for Arsenal to win and both teams to score. I just think that sometimes the prices move a little bit too much, and it's about 13-5 the price for that. It only takes a moment, a mistake, or a moment of quality to for any team to score a goal. Now Wolves, let's get it out there. They have been dreadful. Like, the confidence has completely gone. The Man United performance, they made Man United look, I think, a far better team than Manchester United actually are. Yeah. But they have got João Gomez back from suspension, who's an important key player for them. I'm not saying that they're going to make the game tight. I just think their XG around 13 is nearly double the amount of goals they've scored, 7. Arsenal have got a lot of players out the back at the moment, and Gabriel, Saliba, Calafiori is suspended for this one as well. So I was a bit surprised that he didn't start the game against Bruges, bearing that in mind in midweek. So, and they've only kept, I think, 1 clean sheet in the last 5 Premier League games, Arsenal. So they have been conceding a few. Just going to make a case out. I just think a little bit overpriced, maybe a set piece or a counter-attack. Maybe Wolves can get a goal, but Arsenal will certainly be comfortable winners. Arsenal to win and both teams to score.
I'm sure that the Wolves owners would have expected some sort of bounce from a new manager, Mark, but just nothing so far.
No, I think the bounce was probably, was it September time, wasn't it? They got a point against Tottenham, point against Brighton, and you felt like they were building something, but it's sort of really backwards since then. Atmosphere's become toxic. Fans are unhappy with the ownership. I don't think the manager was the issue in the first place. They've got somebody now that might do a good job for them in the Championship next season. But you also worry that any of that feel-good factor kind of disappears before they even get there. So I'm not as confident as Dan in Wolves being able to score. I'm going to go for Arsenal to win 2-0. They've done exactly that in 6 of their last 8 home games. And Brentford went to the Emirates a few weeks ago and picked a team that was sort of admitted they'd lost before they'd even turned up. Keith Andrews rested everybody. I'm not saying Wolves will rest everyone, but when it feels like you get times when people just sort of almost accept that they've lost a game before it's even started. I think that might be the case here.
Yeah, looks that way. Let's head to the clash at Stamford Bridge now, because Chelsea desperately need a win, you'd have to say, as they host Everton on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Chelsea 4-6 to claim the victory here. Everton 17-4, and the draw is 14-5. Are we now starting to see that little bit of a tricky patch for Chelsea because they're making so many changes, Mark, do you think? Or is this just, where they're at?
No, I've been disappointed with them in sort of the last 3 away games. You can blame Maresca for making changes. I think they've still picked a team that should be able to do better. I think Chelsea should hold themselves to higher standards. I think that, you've seen Villa and kind of how quickly they've propelled themselves up the table. When Chelsea played as well as they did against Arsenal and Barcelona, I think you have to question the attitude of them away from home, really, for perceived smaller matches. And I had a look at the sort of expected goals against Leeds and Bournemouth, and they only racked up 1.7 across that entire 180 minutes. And they've been beaten by Atalanta in the Champions League. They're not going great in Serie A by any stretch of the imagination. So you sometimes get this with younger teams, I suppose, inconsistencies, but I think that's on the manager to instill this kind of attitude that you treat Bournemouth like you do Barcelona, and they sometimes don't. In terms of a bet for this game, I was struggling because Chelsea tend to be much better at home, but Everton are a tough nut to crack. They've got 4 wins in 5, won't be a pushover. Their last 5 away games have all gone under 2.5 goals, and that was the way I was looking, because I just think Chelsea are lacking a bit of fluency at the moment.
Yeah, hard to have any real confidence in them at the stage. I mean, Dan, I watched Everton dismantle Nottingham Forest last weekend. It was really impressive, their performance at home. Have they got enough in them to go and claim a result here?
I wouldn't be surprised, Warren. I've seen quite a few of their, the game at Manchester United with 10 men, where they started well with 11 and then won the game with 10. The game at Bournemouth recently as well, they were worthy 1-0 winners, I felt, in that game. So they're looking nice and solid, and they're carrying a bit of a threat as well. Grealish can often produce something. Dewsbury Hall starting to score goals from midfield. That's kind of needed because, we know about the front two, Beto and Barry, have had massive issues scoring goals. They do need them goals from midfield areas, but and defending nice and solidly. Chelsea, I watched the game against Leeds. I thought they were really poor. I thought Leeds were well-deserved winners. Then a kind of poor performance against Bournemouth. It was a good time to play Bournemouth, really. With they had a few issues with injuries and suspension, poor form Bournemouth going into it, and they didn't capitalise. And then they lost to Atalanta. I wonder if in these league games, they've had 2 games without Caicedo, who does a lot of their energy in terms of winning the ball back and then winning it high and then driving forward. I wonder if they're missing him. This is his 3rd game of his suspension, domestically, so they're still going to miss him again. I've got the same bet as Mark. I can see Everton going there frustrating and it being quite a tight, low-scoring game. Going to go under 2.5 goals.
Okay, we're going to head to the big derby of the weekend now. It is the Weir Tyne derby at the Stadium of Light. Sunderland against Newcastle at 2:00 on Sunday. And Sunderland 11-5 to claim the victory here. It's 13-10 Newcastle and 23-10 the draw. It is fair to say, as ever with derby games, no love lost here, Dan. And Sunderland, not many people would have, I'm sure, predicted they would have been higher than Newcastle on the table going into this encounter. Maybe just signs a little bit of things not necessarily unravelling, but not being where they were maybe sort of 3 or 4 weeks ago for Sunderland. That was a disappointing result at Manchester City.
Yeah, but look how far they've come. We're talking about a loss away to Manchester City now, with Sunderland as being like a setback and a thing to be worried about. Now, we've been here, we seem to get here every time they lose a game, everyone thinking that they're going to fall off a cliff, and they haven't actually lost, back-to-back games yet, which is, again, is a fantastic credit to them and the manager, the recruitment that they've done. I think they're going to bounce back here. I think, a derby game, they're unbeaten at home. The atmosphere there has always been amazing this season. It's going to be absolutely rocking this weekend. And Newcastle are not, they're not a reliable team, are they, away from home? There's a decent, draw they got in the Champions League in the week, conceded late on. Watched a bit of that game. It was like a basketball game. It was for a lot of it. You attack, we attack. But in the league, I know they had the win, didn't they, away to Everton, where they scored really early and ran away with it. But that's an outlier with regards to their away form in the league. They've been, pretty unreliable. So 4 weeks to prepare. Sunderland, fantastic home record. Genuinely good side, capable of bouncing back. I just think odds against draw no bet. I would take that. Yeah, Sunderland draw no bet.
Okay, Mark. I mean, Newcastle we were concerned for them at the start of the season when they lost Isak in terms of goals. They seem to have resolved that problem going forward. It's maybe at the back where they've been a little bit more shaky, and Sunderland may maybe take advantage.
Sorry, Warren, I'm still trying to recover from you calling it the Weir Tyne derby. You sure? I think it's the time. It's got to be the Tyne Weir derby.
No, yeah, but when Sunderland are at home, it always has to go down as Weir Tyne, and then Tyne and Weir when it's at Newcastle.
Next thing you'll be saying, pass me the pepper and salt. No, so I think I watched the Newcastle game in its entirety on Wednesday against Leverkusen. I thought Newcastle were poor, very poor in the first half. Improved a lot after the break, and I don't think they deserve to win, even though the goal came late from Leverkusen. I think probably draw was about right, really, given how bad they were in the first half. I think defensively there are issues. There've been some injuries, haven't there, at the back in terms of kind of getting a frequency of that kind of back four together, and the goalkeeper Pope's been out, and the back four seems to change. Seen Burn at left back, seen him at centre back. Cher's been in and out. So Livramento as well has sort of had his injury problems, hasn't he, this season? So maybe if you want to sort of cut them some slack, Newcastle, you would say that that's an issue. I also think there's a big drop-off once one of that Tonali, Guimaraes or Joelinton midfield doesn't start. I know Miley got his goal in midweek and is a sort of one for the future, but those three are really important. And I think the squad is an issue for Eddie Howe. Just don't think they bat as deep as some of the other teams that are trying to compete on multiple fronts. In terms of this game, I've got a drawdown as the best bet. People get really excited about derby games, but unless you support one of the teams, they can be a bit of a dull watch. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was one of those 100-mile-an-hour sort of ferocious tempo, but not much quality to it. Sunderland, just a point there, Warren. I mean, you mentioned that 3-0 defeat at City. What I would say is that they'd played at Liverpool 3 days earlier. And I think that probably had taken a fair bit out of them. It's hard for any team to back up a Wednesday, Saturday, sort of 2 hard away games like that. So I'm expecting a completely different Sunderland side. And in terms of the 3 potential outcomes, I think Newcastle would be the least favoured of my 3, but probably the draw is the best bet.
2 things you can guarantee from this game. 1, a cracking atmosphere. Secondly, Sunderland will not be putting Newcastle decorations up around the away end as they did last time and went down like a lead balloon, as you can imagine, with their home fans. 5 games down, 5 to go, and it's to Anfield next on Saturday, a 3:00 kickoff as Liverpool face Brighton. As far as the odds are concerned, Liverpool 7-10 to claim the victory here. It's 15-4 the away team and 3-1 the draw. Mark, we discussed on the Euro assist this week the Mo Salah situation. Not really much has changed in terms of sort of his stance, but Liverpool did pick up a much-needed win against Inter Milan on Tuesday.
Most interesting aspects of that was the change of formation to a midfield diamond. Clearly worked because they won 1-0, looked more solid defensively. The Salah can play in a kind of diamond sort of team because he can play up front with one of the 2 other strikers. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of his Liverpool career, but unless he apologises, I don't think Slot can have him anywhere near the squad. It was a big win for Liverpool. Maybe it galvanised them and they needed something like that just to sort of pull everyone together again. But I just can't trust them at the prices. We've seen Man United, Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest, PSV, not amazing teams go to Anfield. And in the case of Forest and PSV, absolutely destroy them and humiliate Liverpool. So I'm going to go for a Brighton win. They're the sort of team, Brighton, quite quirky, capable of winning anywhere, and they're the sort of team that can win at Anfield and lose at home to Wolves, Brighton. And so I think at big prices, I sort of like to be with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable what Mark's saying, bearing in mind recent results, Dan. I just wonder, how much that win over Inter Milan, as Mark mentioned the word galvanised there, will maybe have impacted on Liverpool. And have we maybe seen the last appearance of Mo Salah in a Liverpool jersey?
Possibly. I'm not even sure Arne Slot knows yet. I think the ball is firmly in Mo Salah's court, really, with regards to whether he'll climb down and make the apology that he should make. But I will be wary actually of reading too much into the midweek result. We've seen this a couple of times before. They went and won 5-1 at Eintracht Frankfurt when they were in the middle of a poor run in the league. Then when we were dreadful and lost 3-2 at Brentford. They then had the great result against Real Madrid, and then a few days later were beaten 3-0 at Manchester City. So we've kind of been here before, where they have a good result in the Champions League and then go back to poor performance in the Premier League. I watched their game at Leeds. I mean, I thought Leeds at times earlier in the game were a bit leggy after they put so much into the Chelsea game before. But I think Liverpool, there were still so many deficiencies in their team. And it's not all down to whether Salah plays or whether he doesn't. Isak is still struggling for form. Wirtz, I thought, against Leeds just looked lost again. He's struggling really to impact the game, not getting in the right areas of the pitch to do any damage. And I think he maybe looks better in the Champions League games than he does in the Premier League at the moment. So there's loads of issues. I agree with Mark that Brighton are a dangerous team as well. Again, often raise their game against strong opposition. And I think that I agree they're overpriced. I won't be quite as bold. I'll go Brighton or draw, double chance.
Okay, up next, it's to Old Trafford. It's another Monday game for Manchester United as they play host to Bournemouth in an 8 o'clock kickoff. And United are 4-5 to claim the 3 points here. It is 14-5 Bournemouth, and the draw is 3-1. Dan, as you mentioned earlier on, quite hard to read too much into that United win against Wolves. They did all right, but obviously Wolves not in great shape as things stand at the moment. A lot of talk at the moment about Mason Mount as well and the impact that he's having for United. Can he play a big role in this game, do you think?
Possibly, yeah. He's certainly looking more lively recently. I just think it is very hard to judge that performance. I mean, you can't criticise it. They were very, very good. Won the game, comfortably. XG was similar mark to the amount of goals that they scored, and probably could have scored more goals as well with better finishing. But Wolves were absolutely dreadful as well. So it's very hard to judge that performance. I just think with United, they're improving, but I don't think that it's as big improvement as maybe the markets are kind of seeing at the moment. I mean, I'm looking at some of their recent home games that I watched. I watched the Everton game where they were very ordinary in that game. The West Ham game as well, probably a fair result in the end, a draw there. And so, I mean, I just think Bournemouth, although they've been on a poor run, the Chelsea result is going to give them a boost. They've had a bit of issues with suspensions that have cleared up now. Tyler Adams is back in the midfield. Senesi was suspended the game before, so they've kind of got their spine back. And they're a dangerous team, Bournemouth. I still believe. I think they're a much more dangerous team than Everton or West Ham are, and they got results at Old Trafford. So I just think United are too short here. I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go with Bournemouth or draw, double chance.
Yeah, it looks to turn on its head for Manchester United, Mark. They were looked reasonably good form at home earlier in the campaign. They now look better away from home, and this is a dangerous clash for them.
Yeah, I try not to read too much into home and away form because I mean it can just send you down a dodgy path, and that these things almost correct themselves at various points. If if you're at one extreme, and we'll maybe get to Tottenham a bit later on, who've kind of been one of the teams best away, terrible at home. Do you remember Brentford last season? They were great at home, I think it was at the start, then couldn't win away, and then it kind of flip-flopped as the season went on. I think Bournemouth or draw double chance is the way I'm looking at this one. Agree, just find it difficult to trust Manchester United. And Bournemouth have won 3-0 on each of their last two visits to Old Trafford, so clearly not overawed by the occasion.
No, definitely not. It is to the City Ground next. We go Sunday, 2 o'clock kickoff, Nottingham Forest, Tottenham. Forest are priced at around about, he says, looking at his list, 31-20 to claim the win here. It's 9-5 Spurs and 23-10 the draw. Is it fair to say, Mark, that the atmosphere around the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium's kind of improved the last couple of weeks? It seems like the fans are certainly on side now after a bit of a turnaround.
Yeah, it was a big moment when Romero got the equaliser against Newcastle. I think that just calmed everything down. Had they lost that game, as they probably deserved to, then I think it would have been panic stations ahead of the Brentford game. They got that late goal, played really well against Brentford. Best home performance of the season, second best performance of the season behind the Man City one. backed it up with a comfortable win over limited opponents against Slavia Prague. But I think there have been reasons for the upturn, and Thomas Frank has decided to split up the much maligned central midfield partnership of Bentancur and Paulinho. More progressive players have played in there in recent weeks, with Bergvall or Archie Gray. Xavi Simons has sort of come alive in the last couple of matches. Richarlison as well has looked lively up front, as has Kolo Muani. So I think Tottenham are heading in the right direction, and probably the kind of team that might be ahead of the market at the moment. Market's still very negative about them. Outsiders at the City ground against a Forest team that I was going to say not pulling up any trees. Maybe that's a dodgy pun with the tricky trees, but they've lost 2 of their last 3 league games, Forest, to 0 against Brighton and Everton. They've had less time to prepare. So I just thought Spurs were probably a bit overpriced.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying for the last few weeks, I thought Forest will be absolutely fine. They'll drag themselves away from the relegation zone. That might be the case, but wasn't impressed with them at all at Everton last week. And I think they're probably missing Chris Wood as that focal point up front down at the moment. And just that experienced head at the top of the formation.
Yeah, you would think that Chris Wood would really suit as well. Quite more direct, style of play there. That's being used at the moment. You look at all of their last 3 games. I mean, the one that we didn't mention, they got the 1-0 win at Wolves. But when you put that in the context of Wolves' recent performances, that's no great shakes either. The poor performances, in the certainly dreadful performance in the defeats at Everton. And I do agree that Spurs are turning the corner a little bit. I agree it was a big moment getting the result at Newcastle. Xavi Simons, I think, he's gone from being a fringe player and no confidence suddenly to fuller confidence, and he's starting to look the part in there. They're making a big difference in that area of the pitch. Kudus, I think, has looked much more lively last couple of games. I think there was a period when he kind of gone off the boil. So the Spurs, their attack is looking a lot more dangerous. Defence now that Van der Ven and Romero back together. They a few weeks ago they were missing the odd game. That was an issue as well. So yeah, I would have Spurs as favourites. I think they're overpriced to win.
Okay, 2 more Premier League games to look forward to. And we start off at the G-Tech Community Stadium, where Brentford play host to Leeds. And that game takes place at 4:30 on Sunday. Brentford 19-20 to claim the win here. Leeds 29-10, and the draw is 5-2. How do you see this one, Dan?
I think Brentford are a bit too short. I just think that done a lot of good things so far this season. I thought the performance at Spurs, when we're talking about Spurs being good, I thought Brentford were really poor in that game as well. I think that'll have been a bit of a jolt to their kind of belief and confidence. And they've got a very strong home record, but I think Leeds I think the last 3 games, everyone was going into it and talk about Daniel Farke being under massive pressure. And I include the City game in this, even though they lost it. The fact that they showed such a good reaction and competed on, got back from 2 goals behind, nearly got a result. And they back that up with 4 points from 2 really tough home games. They've shown that they can. Don't just play one way now. They've changed the formation to a back 3 at City. That worked for them. Worked for them again when they started that way against Chelsea, and then they switched again when they were behind against Liverpool. Went back to the back 4, and that worked. So they're not a one-trick pony anymore. They're starting to show different ways of playing and getting results, and that augurs well for them. Having a good chance of surviving. I can see this being a close game. Leeds certainly in better recent form at the moment than Brentford. And I think they'll pick a result up. I'll go with a draw.
Do you think Leeds have turned the corner now, Mark?
Yeah, when they lost 6 or 7, Daniel Farke was kind of insisting throughout most of that they were playing well and that things were just going against them. I think the fans felt like maybe the Tottenham game, the Aston Villa games at home, on another day they might have picked up at least a point in those matches. Remember when they went to Fulham away and there was that ridiculous own goal that they scored. So the kind of things have just been going against Leeds for most of the season. They weren't sort of playing quite as bad, I don't think, as most of the results suggested. Confidence restored. They've found some goals with 8 in the last 3 games, and a bit like I'm going to agree with Dan again here. I just can't be backing Brentford at odds on. It just makes me sort of nervous. They played Burnley in their last home game and needed 2 very late goals. It was 1-1, wasn't it, after 85 minutes? So Leeds are better than Burnley, and I think Brentford might have even more trouble here.
Speaking of Burnley, they are bringing up the rear on this week's Assist Premier League run-through because they're at home to Fulham on Saturday at 5:30. The Clarets 3-1 here to gain the win. It's 10-11 Fulham and the draw 5-2. Is it too early to say that this is a must-win for Burnley, Mark?
Yeah, yes, it is, Warren. I mean, having sort of at the start of this podcast and lamented the kind of Liverpool have won the league, Arsenal have won the league. You get it at the bottom as well. Now I might agree that Wolves are in a sticky spot, but Burnley don't need to win this game. It would be helpful if they did win it. Of course it would, and this is one of the more winnable games on their schedule. And I'm going to go for them to pick up a positive result here in sort of back Burnley or draw double chance. Fulham, just again away from home, odds on, makes me nervous backing Fulham. I have to say, and I think that if you look at Burnley, they are the worst team in the league. They've 6 losses on the spin, and that tells its own story. However, 3 of them were by only 1 goal.
Yeah.
2 of the others came against Arsenal and Chelsea, and the 3-1 I've already mentioned against Brentford, they were 5 minutes away from a point there. So they've mainly been competitive at home. They've beat Sunderland and Leeds, and I just think Fulham lack the firepower to sort of warrant an interest at such cramped odds.
And if they do win here, Dan, they'll move to within 4 points of the Cottagers, and all of a sudden that kind of drags Fulham back down.
Yeah, big game for both clubs. I think Fulham are the more likely winners. I think they've lost the last couple of games, but they've certainly shown more than Burnley have, and Burnley on a 6-game losing run. Burnley got a few issues in the fullback areas as well, with Perez and Walker both suspended, so they're going to have to make a couple of changes there. But I just think that at home they do defend quite tight. Burnley. I mean, all of their 7 home games in the Premier League gone under 3 goals. They don't consider. They've played some big teams at home as well, and not been massively turned over. And I agree with it. Fulham at a shade of odds on. That away form only 4 points. 3 of them were against Spurs. Spurs were in a really bad moment going into that game. Just lost to Arsenal and PSG. So I think the price is too short for Fulham. If you want to have a better shade of odds on, I would far more fancy going for under 2.5 goals. As I said, all 7 home games for Burnley under 2.5 goals. I would back that trend to continue.
Okay, well, that is the Premier League covered for another week. Next up, it's your FPL update, and then we'll discuss all things EFL. Well, it's Fantasy Premier League time again now, and Tom Hill joins us for his thoughts on the best players to have in your fantasy team this week.
The non-stop FPL action continues on Saturday as Game Week 16 gets underway, with 4 games scheduled on December the 13th. Those managers who planned accordingly could have 5 free transfers to help them tinker with their teams as AFCON approaches. With that in mind, let's look at the best options for the game week ahead. According to the odds, Arsenal have the best chance of keeping a clean sheet as they face Wolves. The Old Gold have only scored 1 away goal all season, and they have 1 point from their 7 ties away from Molineux. Even though Mikel Arteta has several defenders sidelined, they still kept a clean sheet against Club Brugge in the Champions League, and Pierre-O Nketiah, priced at 5.4 million, looks fit to start this weekend. He scored 11 points in 2 weeks, and with so many teammates sidelined, he offers a cheap route into the best defence in the league against the worst attack. Into midfield and £10.2 million asset, Bukayo Saka gives us an Arsenal double-up. He was rested in midweek against Club Brugge coming off the bench, which means he should be a nailed-on starter. Rob Edwards' team are the side to target, and Manchester United could easily have scored more than the 4 they did on Monday. Saka last blanked in game week 6, and he has 4 goals and 2 assists to his names this season. With Wolves looking so vulnerable and exposed at the back, Saka could haul this weekend at the Emirates Stadium, and he's certainly the viable captaincy option. Brentford forward Thiago returns to our three-man panel this weekend despite successive blanks. The £7 million asset was benched against Arsenal while he could only get 2 points against Tottenham, but both of those games were away from home, and in his last 2 games on home soil he's got successive braces. In fact, in his last 3 matches in front of a home crowd he has 5 goals, and he faces a Leeds defence that has not kept a clean sheet since August.
Well, a big thanks to Tom, as ever, for his FPL update. We're going to turn our attentions now to the EFL. And last week we focused on the League One promotion battle. Well, League Two is almost as tight as well. Walsall are once again sat at the top after their capitulation last season, of course, saw them miss out on promotion. Huge win for Notts County in midweek over the MK Dons to get them inside the top 3. And down just 8 points now, separating 7th from 1st. It's a very similar situation, like we said, to League One, where it's pretty much anybody's promotion at the moment.
Yeah, I don't see there being like a runaway, team that's going to, go and win it at a canter. I mean, a lot of people talk about MK Dons, the fact that everybody says that their budget is way bigger than everybody else. He's got Paul Walton in there, a manager who's managed, quite a lot in the Championship, but I don't see them. I mean, they had the loss, didn't they? To Notts County in the week. They're struggling to sort of put that consistent run of wins together. I just think it's going to be open up, and I wouldn't rule out a real smaller club, Bromley. I think Bromley, I mean, they keep quite a simple, direct tactics, but they are a tough team to play against, especially on their own ground. Not been beaten in a home game. They've got a huge physical threat, especially centre backs cause a lot of problems from set pieces. And they're hard to play against. It wouldn't surprise me if they even threaten the automatic promotion places. I'm sure that Andy Woodman there's trying to keep a lower profile there, but no, wide open. Walsall obviously have been setting the pace again. Did that last season, didn't they? And then fell away, but got a good win at Oldham. They're going to be there or thereabouts as well.
No lone player to lose midway through the season, hopefully for Walsall this time round to have a big impact. Just to mention there what Dan said about Bromley, 5 wins in their last 6 in the league as well. They're up to 4th in the table. We're going to get Dan's best bets now across the EFL, and we'll start off in the Championship. And what we're looking at here, Dan?
I'm going to go with Southampton to win away to Norwich. Shade of odds against looks like you can get at the moment. Now, Norwich are playing better, definitely under Philippe Clement. I watched the game when at Watford, where they lost 3-2 last weekend. I was quite impressed by them, actually. They look, they come and press Watford. They were decent on the ball, created, a lot of good chances. Then they got to Sheffield United as well, and then got a 1-1 draw. And Sheffield United were in great form. But I just think their home form, I mean, they've got 4 points at home. That Sheffield United game as well. Sheffield United made 8 changes for that game, maybe took Norwich a little bit lightly. And Southampton, the main reason for this bet is that the form that they're in. I mean, in the Championship, they've had 5 wins now from their last 6 games. In the Championship, that is seriously good going. Tonda Eckhart's got the job long term now. Confidence is absolutely flowing. Beat West Brom 3-2 in the week, but they were 3-0 up at half time. I just think that the way they're playing, the confidence they got, at those prices, shade of odds against or even around evens, a really good bet.
Yeah, I saw that Norwich game with Watford, and also as well, Josh Sargent and Kenny McLean are injury concerns at the moment. Those two were big players in that game against Watford when they were in front on 2 separate occasions. So Dan's going with the selection of Southampton against Norwich in the Championship. What about League One, Dan?
I'm going to go with Cardiff home to Doncaster. So I looked at the prices here. They're only at 4-5, only a shade of odds on. Now, sometimes you can look at a league table and be kind of conned by it a little bit, but I just think Cardiff are a really strong side. Put the only side in League One showing any consistency. They're averaging more than 2 points a game. 7 home wins out of 9 in the league. Away from home, they're kind of having to dig results out. They dug out a good win away to Northampton and a 1-0 win at Stevenage in the week in what was a tight game. But at home, they're much more free flowing. They're scoring more than half. 2/3 of their goals in the league have been scored in home games. And Doncaster started the season well, but they've been on a real poor run. Only 1 win in the last 12 league games, and I don't see why Cardiff are only just a shade of odds on Cardiff to win.
No, so Southampton, Cardiff so far in Dan's 3 EFL selections. And last but not least in League Two, Dan, who are we going for here?
I'm going to go with Gillingham at home to Barrow. We mentioned the top 7, didn't we, in League Two, but it's quite tight for quite a way down that division. Gillingham are in 8th place. They're certainly going to be looking to push towards the playoffs and maybe even towards the top 3. Home to a Barrow side that have struggling a little bit recently. Lost 3-0 at home to Tranmere on Tuesday. Had the captain, the centre-back Canavan, sent off towards the end of that game. So they've got quite a small squad anyway. Barrow had 6 players on the bench for that game. And Gillingham, they've had a lot of draws, 4 draws in a row recently, but I just think this is an easier fixture for them. They got a 0-0 away to Colchester in what was a tough game. I think it was the only League Two fixture on the card last weekend with the FA Cup, but that was a decent result for them. I think they'll back it up now with a home win over Barrow.
Okay, just to remind you then that Dan's EFL selections this week, Southampton, Cardiff and Gillingham across the 3 divisions. Time now for Mark's Premier League Bet Builder. And Mark, we're looking at the game at Selhurst Park, Crystal Palace, Manchester City. And what's the first leg of this week's Bet Builder?
Yeah, the first leg is Manchester City to win. They got a fantastic victory away to Real Madrid in the Champions League in midweek. I think Pep Guardiola would have been absolutely delighted with that performance because I think it showed a maturity in this sort of new side. I did question whether they had it in them in like the really big away games, but they don't come much bigger than Real Madrid. They performed well, all facets of the game in good working order. And they've got obviously real quality going forward, which lends itself to the second sort of leg of the bet builder, which is over 2.5 goals. Doku down that left-hand side, creating a lot of chances for Erling Haaland. But you do wonder about sort of City defensively. They always seem to give up a couple of opportunities in sort of every game, really. They've conceded in 6 of their last 7 away matches now. So Man City to win, over 2.5 goals. And I'm going for the comeback kid, Phil Foden, to score or assist in the game at Selhurst Park. In his last 3 Premier League games, he's got 6 goal contributions. That for the older sort of viewers and listeners like myself is a goal or assist. So he's impacting matches all the time at the moment. He's sort of playing in that Kevin De Bruyne role, and he's playing it very well. Obviously, I mean, he'll be thinking of City and winning Premier Leagues and Champions League, but also in the back of his mind, there's a World Cup coming up, and a big 6 months or so for him to force his way into Thomas Tuchel's reckoning and playing like the way that he is. I expect him to cause a lot of problems for Palace.
Okay, so just a quick reminder of Mark's Premier League Bet Builder. Manchester City to win, over 2.5 goals, and Phil Foden to score or assist. We're going to go on to the Assist Treble now. And last week, a very unlikely 0-0 draw at the Vitality Stadium scuppered the treble of Cardiff, Crystal Palace and Chelsea. Hopefully we can go one better this week. Dan, we'll start with your selection first. Who are you picking for the treble?
Yeah, Cardiff didn't let us down. They were going to go with them again. They're on course for an immediate return to the Championship, averaging more than 2 points per game. Scored 22 of their 32 goals have been at home. They're quite free-flowing at home, play some good football. And they're playing against the Doncaster team. Lost 2-0 at home to Stockport in the week. They're only 3 points now above the relegation zone. Cardiff to win that one. Okay,
so it's Cardiff for Dan. Mark, I think you're looking into Europe.
Yeah, Serie A from Milan to beat Sassuolo. Milan having a good season. I didn't really expect them to go well under the return in Allegri, but they are. And on XG, they're actually 3rd in Serie A. So it's not a fluke that they're kind of right in the thick of the title race in Italy. Rafael Leao was injured in the last game, but Pulisic actually came back in that fixture and scored twice off the bench. So a good steady replacement if Leao is unavailable. Rabiot and Modric, very classy in midfield. Modric, I mean, I'd say rolling back the years. He was rolling back the years about 10 years ago, but I don't think he's ever going to get to a stage where he's not dictating things in midfield because, he could be 50. His passing quality is just extraordinary. And, the slower pace of the Italian football seems to suit him quite well. Milan, strong favourites, but I expect them to win.
Luka Modric, the Benjamin Button of European football. So it's Milan for Mark, it's Cardiff for Dan, and I'm going to go with Millwall to beat Hull in the Championship. Millwall up to third after 3 wins and a draw in the last 4 games. They're now just 4 points outside the automatic promotion places, unbeaten in 6 at the New Den, including wins over the likes of Stoke and Southampton recently. And that was a big win at Bristol City last weekend, which of course ended with a bit of fisticuffs on the touchline as well. Hull are 6th after a home win over Wrexham in midweek, but they have lost 3 of their last 5 games, and they've only won 3 of their 9 away league matches this season. There's also fitness concerns over Joe Gelhardt, who missed that Wrexham match. He's their main man, and that will be significant if he doesn't play as well. So I'm going for Millwall to come out on top. So just a reminder that the assist treble this week is Millwall, AC Milan and Cardiff. And we'll conclude the show with the naps of the week from Mark and Dan. And Dan, we'll start with your nap first.
Yeah, going to go with Southampton to win at Norwich. I mean, they're the form team, as I said, in the Championship. 1 point off the playoffs, but I think they'll be looking at pushing towards the automatics. You know, a lot of games, 26 games still to go in the Championship. And Norwich are in a big relegation battle at the moment. Quite a gap still between them. I think they're only 8 points behind Blackburn, who are 5th from bottom. So they're in a massive hole, even though their performances have improved. As you mentioned earlier, Warren, as well, McLean and Sargent are being forced off in the 1-1 draw at Sheffield United. I think Southampton will have too much.
Okay, so it's Southampton for Dan. Who's your nap, Mark?
There'll be claret everywhere at the London Stadium. I'm hoping there'll be goals everywhere as well. So I'm going for both teams to score. West Ham against Aston Villa. Villa, before the game on Thursdays, we're speaking before that, they've won 7 in a row, full of confidence. West Ham only got 1 clean sheet this season, but I thought their front three looked very lively against Brighton last week. So expecting goals at both ends.
Okay, big thanks to both Mark and Dan for their input in this week's assist. If you like your golf, don't forget, of course, that Steve Palmer is with us every Tuesday with the Sweet Spot. We've also got a World Championship darts preview with Steve and Henry Hardwick to check out on the Racing Post YouTube channel as well. The assist will be back next week. In the meantime, of course, don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. Enjoy your weekend football, and please remember to gamble responsibly.